you have a chance in IT, not just maybe to sell insurance or build cars or do something like that, but to save people's lives. And I'm like, that's it, right? So that was the big kind of change I made to say, this is where I want to do. And then from there, when I went over to the software side, that was always my goal. How do I improve lives of people using technology in IT?
All right. This is the Story Series podcast where we tell the stories behind the people. Chester, Stockton, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Good. I'm so excited to talk to you. So I usually read an introduction up front for people, but I think this one is better served coming from you. So just to tee it up, could you talk to us about what a senior solutions engineer / architect is?
Yeah, so it's not always apparent as to what it is and what I did, but I actually worked for a software company, and so I wasn't like an engineer, like that wrote code and things like that. What I basically did was kind of address the C-level area of a company, kind of learn about what their goals are from a business aspect, and then kind of overlay that to how their technology and IT department could help them reach those goals. So it was kind of a layered approach. And then I'd get down and I'd lay down the type of solutions, right, that would help them. I worked a lot with, towards the end of my career, actually towards the middle of my career as well, with hospitals and how they wanted to use their technology, right, to better, say, patient care, things of that nature. So I spent a lot of time doing research and talking to folks in that level, and then I'd lay down solutions, including cybersecurity, things like that, how you're going to secure data, all those different types of things.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I'm excited to dig all into that with you. I'd love to get there. I always like to start with origin stories.
Sure.
And so in preparation for this interview, you gave me a manuscript to take a look at, a book that's not yet published that you wrote.
Yes.
It's called The Tribe.
Yes.
And it's beautifully written. And it's
Thank you.
Literally about you growing up, but also you tracing your family's origins. And so I just want to start with asking, what caused you to sit down and write about your life and your family's origins? Like, how old were you when you started to kind of wonder, beyond yourself and going back?
Interesting. Well, that last question is very interesting because, since I was young, I always kind of looked outside of myself and like into the world and kind of wondered. It's why I relate from a music standpoint to, say, a John Lennon or a Bob Marley or, people like that, because they were always looking at, how the world could be better and things like that. So that happened at a really early age. The book inception really was, I wanted to document my family history for the younger generation. I had all these stories that all the older folks would tell me about things, and you read some of them in the book, and there's some just, some people believe, some part of a story, some people don't.
Yes.
Right. And so I wanted to get all that written out. That's how it started. And then I had this party. A friend of mine called me from Paris. I had not seen him in 20 years. And he says, hey, I'm coming home, and I'd like to, kind of see some of the folks we grew up with. And so I have a party, right? And everybody shows up, all my neighborhood, and people flew in, and it got me to thinking that my experience growing up was really cool, right? I had all these great relationships that kind of never went away, no matter where people were, right? My friend told me, he said, "Yeah, I didn't know how to find you, but I made one phone call, right, or two, and I right, because we're still all connected." And so that then kind of had me change the book a little bit in a different direction to kind of document outside of my own family history, the history of the area that I grew up in, right? The neighborhood and things like that.
And what area was that?
Oh, so that was Pasadena.
Yeah.
Right. And I didn't realize how small Pasadena was Um, I thought, like say where I live now is a small city, 330,000 people.
Yeah.
Pasadena only has like 100,000 people, 109,000 people. When I was growing up, probably less, right? So I didn't really realize I grew up in a small town,
Yeah.
but I did
Yeah.
actually. Yeah.
Can,
So,
can you take me through like a typical day in your neighborhood growing up? Like what were
well,
the sounds? Who was around?
yeah. So, especially during the summer, right? We went out and played, right?
Outside.
Right.
Yeah.
This was a long time ago,
Yeah.
but
Different from kids now, right?
yeah. So we played baseball, right? And so I grew up on like a dead end street, which is now called cul-de-sac.
Yeah.
And there was a manhole right there, and that was like home plate. So we would play baseball all day long, right in the street, or we'd play basketball. Um, my next door neighbor, their house was kind of the gathering point for everybody.
Yeah.
So we might go over there and play basketball or play caroms. I don't know.
What's caroms?
It's kind of like pool, but the the balls are just kind of little wooden pieces that you shoot into different places, and then we play a game called Capture the Flag.
Oh yeah.
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 So we do that. So I couldn't wait to go outside, right, in the summer and
Yeah.
things like that. School, during school days, you go to school and you come home, and then I played baseball and I did things like that. But
Yeah.
all the neighborhood, I went to anybody's house in my neighborhood. The doors weren't locked. I, go in, say I'm here.
Yeah.
They might feed me. We might go outside. It was a really kind of cool environment that you don't always see today.
Yeah, yeah. I in fifth grade we moved to a cul-de-sac,
Mm-hmm.
and that was way more community oriented. Everyone's always at the top of the street, all the kids,
Yeah.
right? And there is something special about that. There's always the house that you hang out in.
Yeah,
And you do just open and I'm here. And that's what you say. And you get dinner. And thinking of your introduction to being a senior solutions engineer, and then looking at that kid back then playing baseball out in the street. What is the same? And did you have
What's the same and what's different? Yeah.
Yeah.
So one key really was my parents never told me I couldn't do something, right? No matter what I said I wanted to do, they said, you can do it if you work hard and you do the right things. And I said some outrageous stuff. I want to be an astronaut, right? I want to be president or something like that. And that would have been really rare at that particular time. Not so much today, but they never said, no, you can't be that or you can't do that, right? And so that was a seed I think that helped me when I got to a point of getting into a computer career, and it was very difficult. I always had the confidence to say, I can learn this, I can do this. The real switch didn't happen because I was an athlete and a musician. But I was always interested in science, and I was in like a special science class and things coming up. So that was another seed that kind of led me to, I wanted understand more about the world and things like that. But the switch really kind of came in college. I was a business major, but I had to take computer classes, and I took one, and then I took a programming language, and I took a couple of things, and I always have a philosophy of trying to look 5 years, 10 years into the future, and it's how I built my career, right? And so when I looked into the future at that time, computers was going to be like the big thing. And so while I was in college, I kind of made that shift, and I got my first job. Really, I was, how do you want to say it? In those days, in the mainframe environment, you had reports that came off, right? And so my first job was actually just kind of distributing reports and, things like that. And I would hang tapes, right? The tapes that they used and everything. And so I really got into that. And then from that point, I always looked what would be the next thing, what would be the next thing, and I tried to guide my career that way.
So in the context of like the computer revolution, so to speak, where was it at that time? What was hot back then? What was that computer that you were learning on?
So I was learning on a mainframe IBM computer is what I first started on. And what I used to do was how I really got into it when I was doing the reports and everything. I'd read all the manuals, right? I'd read all the computer operation manuals and things like that. And so I learned the code. So there's the code. So there's a low language code for mainframe computers called assembly language, and I learned to write in that and do that. So that was how I started, was really the mainframe, and it was large number crunching. I worked for an aerospace
I was going to say, where was this job?
Yeah, so it was actually, oddly enough, it was a stone's throw from where my daughter goes to college now. It was down in Playa Vista, but it was an aerospace company then.
Right.
And so we were building the Army attack helicopters and different things for the military. And so a lot of number crunching on how to build those types of things and everything was what the computing was for. And so that's how I really started. And that was the big thing. And back then, the computer field was really primarily used for the military. And then it kind of advanced to different places. And then that's when I kind of moved on to a different area. One thing I figured out was the serving platform of data, if you will, is going to change, which it has. Mainframe computers are still around, but they're not the main thing anymore, right? It's Windows, it's Linux, it's Unix, it's all these different platforms, right? Even the iOS now, right? So, but I learned that platform is always going to change, but the data is always going to be important, right? Data's gold.
And back then, how were computers viewed? What were they? Because there was no idea of the personal computer yet. It was kind of far from that. So how were they viewed professionally? What did you think computers were there to do?
So almost the same as today. They were there to take everybody's jobs. That hasn't changed, right?
How funny.
So that's what it was. It's okay, computers are going to take people's jobs. And to some degree, that's always going to be true, that automation, right, is going to replace certain things that we do. So if you were a record keeper with a bunch of paper and things like that, that was going to transfer to a computer, and you were not going to have a job at some point.
Yeah. But you saw something in it where you found it, just as a young person in college, you found it exciting.
I did. And one of the things that I found is, and maybe this says something about me, is you had to always learn, right? You had to constantly update your knowledge because the technology was always changing. And I don't like to be static. I don't like to do the same thing all the time. I go to a restaurant, I almost never order the same thing. I always like to try new things and do different things. And it's scary, it's risky in that regard. You never know where things are going to go. But yeah, that challenge was always, we used to say that what I knew about IT 5 years ago would be obsolete. Now it's 2 or 3 years. Right, would be obsolete. I couldn't get a job with what I knew 5 years ago, right? You have to continually update. And so I guess that was important to me, and I kind of like that.
Yeah, I'm reminded, there's a Steve Jobs quote where he basically was talking about how all the product accomplishments will be irrelevant in his own lifetime. Everything that he's credited for inventing will be obsolete, before he goes. And yeah, that speaks to that cycle, that never-ending cycle.
It's amazing, the data. We used to tell people, especially cybersecurity, right, that more data will be created in the next 2 years than was in the last 40.
And that's because of...
Now, that was about 10 years ago. Now we're creating data like crazy, right? So that's because, look, your phone probably has more processing power than the mainframe computer I was on 30, 40 years ago, right?
Right.
So the amount of data that gets used now is just incredible. And now with artificial intelligence, that's based off of huge amounts of data, right?
Yeah.
And so again, data is the key.
It's
right?
always been, right?
Yeah.
So can you just define, because I think we hear it all the time, but just what is data?
Really, it's the stored information, right? I don't know about stored because a lot of it is in flight a lot, right? But it's your patient records, it's your bank records, it's the financial statements, it's the supermarket that tracks what you buy and then sends you stuff. It's your phone listening to you, and all that is data, basically information that's stored and then analyzed, and then it's used for you or against you.
I was going to say, why is it valuable?
It's valuable, I think, to society, right, for advancement. So if I need to do something better, I use data to tell me how to do that, right? I need to, build a better car. I need to build a better bomb. I need to build a better, whatever that is, right? I use a lot of the past information. So it's not like we didn't have it before, right? It's just that I can access it now and analyze it so much faster, right?
Yeah.
So it used to, I'm going through papers and I'm analyzing, I'm doing different things. I got a calculator here. I feed that information into, what is now a computer, and instantly pops out, these are dimensions that you need to do this. I need to fly lower in a plane. I need to land in this, but all those different things,
all those variables.
That's all data, right? That's being used and read. So
and now I have to imagine the data collecting methods are so much wider because we input a lot of it ourselves, right? In social media, Facebook, Instagram. They like to say it's free, but it's not really free. It's free because you're giving them all your data, right?
Yes.
And that's why it's free. And then you get served advertisements, and then there's all kinds of controversies about Facebook or Meta packaging the data and selling it, right?
Sure.
There's things like that. That's what we're talking about here. Where now it's so much more personal.
Yes, and you say we give up our data freely, if you will. Sometimes we don't know it.
Right.
And I used to tell people, well, they're tracking me and doing. I said, that ship has sailed, man. You guys don't realize they've been tracking you for a long time, right?
Yeah.
I wrote programs, right, that did that. So that's the thing that gets a little when you think about ethics and even like what's legal. That's when it gets a little tricky as to the things you're doing. You can actually, I had this happen. I went into a restaurant once and I used my phone to pay the bill, right? A takeout. And when I left, I got a text, right? So they tracked that and they sent me a text, type of thing. Well, I didn't really give them my number. I just used a credit card on the phone. They even have things where when you drive into a certain area, they can read on your phone and figure out. I probably shouldn't talk about that.
Well, on this for a second, do you have do's and don'ts that you can share about best practices for people?
Yeah. So for a while, when I worked in cybersecurity, I was probably like a police officer that sees all the bad people and then kind of, so since I saw the bad actors, I did almost nothing online for a long time, right? I've gotten a little more comfortable now, but in general, I try and keep my digital footprint as small as possible. And there's different ways to do that. And the other thing is, if I do not open any attachment, and my friends get bothered with this. If you send me an attachment and like a text with an I will not open it.
Well, I can tell you, it's funny because I sent you a text for my birthday, and it was like the picture of the invitation,
Right.
And you're like, "Oh, what does it say?"
Yeah.
Like it won't open, or I can't open this on my phone. And I said, "Oh, that's Chester's like security background, like interesting."
It is. It is. I do. I'm very. I've gotten a little better at that as well because I have a lot of protection on my phone and my computers and things like that. So, but just as a general rule, just be very careful about. Give you an example. When I worked for a cybersecurity company, I got an email, I think it was, that said that during my travel, my card, there was an expense on my card that was wrong or something like that, right? And kind of click on this, to fix it. So I got my card, my credit card, and I called the credit card company. And I asked them, did you send me something that says this problem? He said, no, it's not from us. So turns out my company was doing a test to see how many people would click on the link to, say to fix their card. So it was bogus, right? So that's the kind of thing, you get all these texts and emails and people wanting to click on things and things like that. So I would just say, be very leery of that. Always also have some software protection for your personal devices.
What about a VPN?
VPN is
virtual private network.
Essential.
Essential.
Yes.
Okay.
Essential.
Okay.
Yes. You want, if you understand what a VPN is, it kind of does tunneling and encrypting and things like that. So you want. One of the most dangerous things is your data in flight, what we call data in flight, right? And, that's when it can be grabbed. So if it's encrypted, if it's tunneled, right, then it's a lot harder. Now, the really, really bad guys can still kind of do it, but it's kind of like I used to use an analogy that if a really good car thief wants to steal your car, they'll be able to do it.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to leave the windows rolled down and the doors unlocked.
Yeah.
And make it easy for the amateur or for, somebody like that. So.
Right, because there's a handful that are just doing it for sport.
Yes.
Whether, as opposed to specifically targeting an individual, which if they want to, they will figure it out. But if it's just for sport, it's like whoever leaves their windows down, we'll just reach in, why not?
Yeah, and that's how some of it has changed. The breaches before used to be just for fun, right? They'd shut down your computer and things like that. They wanted you to know and things like that. Well, so what we call like anatomy of a breach now is different. So one thing is now they want something. They want data, they want information, right? Or they want money or things like that. So they don't want you to know they're there. So when they actually breach your, computer, whatever it is, they don't tell you anymore. They sit there and they watch and they wait for an opening, right? Maybe you didn't do your updates, which is another thing. Always do your updates. Right? Anytime you get an update, like for Windows or for iOS or anything like that, do it, right? Because it's probably some security hole that they found. So they'll sit there and wait for a hole in your security system, right? And then they'll go in and they'll do something, and then they'll get out, and you won't know until maybe a day or two later.
So going back to that first job, was that your first job out of college where you were working on the mainframe at, you said an aerospace company?
Yeah.
Okay. And what is your career trajectory like back then? What are you thinking that you're going to grow into?
I had no idea, really,
No.
like most, young people.
Yeah.
But I was the guy that, like, they said, okay, so at that time, they didn't really have a data management area, right? That was specific. And so they came up and said, we're going to have a data management area, right? Now, I'll do it. Okay, right? And so I would say, for people coming up, 75% of the jobs I took, I probably was not fully qualified for the job when I took it, right? I had the confidence in myself, right? Or the person hiring me did. that I could learn the job, do it well, excel, right, and move on. So this was one of those situations. And then I went from there, and they asked me to be like a manager, go into management. Man, I was like 25 years old, maybe, right? And they're like, "Well, we want you to manage this shift of computer operators." Really? I have people under me? These people are like 40 years old, right? So so I started managing, right, at a very early age in the field, and I said, well, maybe this is my trajectory. But no, that changed. I got another kind of engineering job, if you will, until I then got an offer again for like a management position. And the reason why I kind of like that was my ability to, and again, this goes back to something we talked about before, my ability to share what I've learned and make it more than just within myself, but to a greater area, if you will. So once I was in management, now I could, my experience and expertise and the things I had, I could both share with the people, but I could also affect the company a little different. And that's also how I got in healthcare. So that changed too. That really changed me. I got an offer from a healthcare company, one of the largest hospitals in the country, actually, to come and be the manager of their IT department. So this is all before I went over to the other side of a software company as an engineer, right? This is all before that.
Right.
And I was working at an insurance company. They had just promoted me to like a supervisory position. I get this offer from this other place, and I take the job. My current job counter offers, wants me to stay, offers me a similar position. And the CTO of this hospital calls me up and he says, can you please come in and talk to me before you make a decision? I did. He said, rarely do you get the chance for IT to make a difference in people's lives. We're talking about a hospital. We're talking about saving lives. We're talking about something very, very important. And you have a chance in IT, not just maybe to sell insurance or build cars or do something like that, but to save people's lives. And I'm like, that's it, right? So that was the big kind of change I made to say, this is where I want to do. And then from there, when I went over to the software side, that was always my goal. How do I improve lives of people using technology in IT?
So that goes back to, as you mentioned, that point of view of it's not just about you, but it's how could you make the world or the area around you a better place?
Yes.
And you've kind of always thought that way.
I've kind of always thought that way. Didn't always figure out how to do it.
Yeah. And going back to just those seeds growing up, where do you think that came from? Were there people in your life where you thought, this person is the embodiment of making what's around them better? Where did that come from?
Wow, that's an interesting question. I'm going to start with my parents.
Yeah.
My mother was a nurse.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you can kind of see that, right? And our house was like the hospital because my mother was a nurse, so everybody came.
All the neighborhood kids that hurt themselves.
Yeah, man, right? And so I saw how she did that. My dad was the wisdom giver of the family. So every, drunk uncle that got kicked out of the house with his wife came to our house, and my dad, and so I think I saw it with my parents first, how they thought outside of themselves to help others into better situations and things like that. And then I think then it was the second part was really music. And, I was very young, but I was in the 60s and 70s, and the music there was like that, right? It was, whether it was the Vietnam War or whether it was the, pollution or things in that were going on. And so I think I gravitated towards that, type of thought pattern kind of based on a lot of those different things. I might have had a teacher or two as well.
Yeah.
I think that was important.
Who at the time were some of your musical influences? Because music is also very technical. It's creative, but there's a technicality to it as well. Who are you kind of taking in?
Yeah. So you find a lot of engineers that are also musicians, by the way.
Really? Okay. Well, that's interesting.
The thought pattern is very similar.
Okay. Okay.
For writing music and for playing an instrument and things like that.
Okay.
Same kind of thought patterns. Like, so, I mean, my early influences, wow, that's something. So oddly enough, I was really enamored with the Beatles.
Oh, nice.
And they made a progression, right? They started, yeah, I love you, to, them really getting into kind of a message in their music, right? And Stevie Wonder was also an influence for me, and he did the same thing. He started, a certain way, even as a little kid. But then if you listen to his music in the early 70s, he starts to morph into kind of what's going on in the world. In fact, my life theme song is a Stevie Wonder song called Higher Ground. I won't get into it, but the kind of hook of the song is, I'm going to keep on trying till I reach my higher ground. Mm-hmm. And he talks about all the things that are going on in the world, right? And how he views it, but he's going to keep on striving till he reaches his higher ground.
Huh.
And so that was always, those were influences. And then, I really got into I don't know, it's just so many bands and groups and things.
Yeah.
But Marley was a big influence a little bit later in life,
Mm-hmm.
for me. And it was the same type of thing. He was trying to help his, country and the people in this country, things like that.
It was bigger than music.
Yeah.
He had a message bigger than just his song. He was not just someone performing. He had something to say.
He did.
I've seen you rock a Marley shirt.
Yeah.
Well,
you just kind of taught me something about myself. That's why I kind of gravitated to those types of things.
Yeah, because you're talking about the way you describe yourself as someone who was didn't like to stay the same, and technology is an exciting field because it's constantly changing. And you're talking about the growth of the Beatles and how they changed, and Stevie Wonder, how he changed.
There you go.
And it's like, oh, that's okay. So this is interesting, and people that have messages or something to say that's larger than just being on stage playing sounds that hook you. It's like,
yeah, and I think in a career for me, it's find the work and go to a job and everything, but at some point I think it's great to contribute through your work. You're doing it here in a sense. People are going to look at things of the people you're interviewing and maybe be motivated by that and things. So it's a little bit outside. So I think it's great when you can, look at what you do in a broader sense and things like that, and, kind of strive for that. It doesn't have to be for the whole world. It could be for, like a group of people. So in my retirement, I coach track at a high school, and that's a small group of people, but it's not about the track why I'm there. I'm trying to give back, maybe, some knowledge or wisdom or life stories or things for young people to, so it doesn't have to be the whole world and the whole group.
yeah,
Anything you can do, I think, is great.
yeah. And so now all of this was informing that choice to join this company that was working in healthcare, where it was like, this is now beyond you. You could help other people, and you go, hey, this is a little different from where I'm at. So you said no to that counter offer.
I did.
And you said yes to, and what was this position, this company?
So I managed basically all of IT for this hospital across the country.
And they had many hospitals across the country.
Many hospitals across the country.
And you managed
yes.
that data.
Yes, I managed the data, yeah.
So how do you go about starting something like this? What did they have existing that they wanted you to fix or improve on or build?
Interesting. So one of the reasons why they wanted a new person and a fresh face to do this is because they were putting in the electronic medical record system, which was new at the time. There was only a few hospitals that had ever done it, right? Right, the EMR. So you now can go to any hospital and your records can be transferred to another hospital, right? And they'll be able to read them, and it doesn't have to be the same, like type of hospital. Well, that wasn't actually possible 30 years ago, So 25, 30 years ago, that wasn't possible. If you went to a hospital, their records were stored a certain way, and another hospital didn't store them the same way, right? So your records had to be paper transferred, right? Or some kind of way to this other hospital. There was no uniform way of storing records. So the project that they brought me in to kind of manage was just that. We were overhauling how we formatted our data, if you will, so that it could be read from any hospital. And all the other hospitals were doing the same thing. It was an act that all folks had to do so that everything could be read. So I came in to do that. And how I did it, first of all, I had to go around the country and evangelize, right?
Okay.
This was great because this helped me in my next career when I was a software engineer, of having to get in front of people and, kind of go over a solution of how it's going to do it. And, so I had to go and evangelize to folks, hey, we're going to make some changes here about how your data is stored and how it inputs and everything like that. It's going to be different for you, right, on how you do these things, but it's going to be great, and here's what's going to happen. So,
and how was that received? Because I know people can be resistant to change.
Not well.
No? What were some of their concerns?
Well, so this is my data. You can't touch my data. You can't have my information, right? I don't know what you're going to do with it. I don't,
Yeah.
those types of things.
I mean, same kind of fears that people have now.
Doesn't change that much, really.
So you're viewed as like, here's the computer guy coming in here and he's going to.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was not dealt, but now it's standard, right?
Oh, yeah.
In fact, I mean, so not only is it standard across hospitals, but even when you come into the hospital, have all your information. They give. This is one of the guys when I went to him. He said, "I want my hospital." It was a children's hospital somewhere in the country. I won't say where. He said, "I want it to be the best. I want everyone to want to come to my hospital, and that means I want when patients come in, I want them to feel comfortable to see their data." I want to give them an iPad with all their data on it and everything so they feel comfortable and all these different things, no matter where they came from. They could have come from this hospital or that, hospital. And so the smart hospital was really what he was looking for. And this is how the technology can help, the patient and things like that. So this was kind of an early way of kind of saying this is going to be great for the patients, which are really, if you're a hospital, that's really what you're in the business of.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's really patient. You're not in IT. You're not in the IT business. Although we used to say every company is an IT company.
Right. They just don't know it, or they might not be willing to admit it. But yeah. And so you had to evangelize. And did you start to have people come around and say, okay, what was that? How much of an uphill battle was it?
As we started to implement a bit, and it wasn't really a disruption to the folks as much as they thought. And as we evangelized, again, our goal, right, and our real business is patient and patient care, right? And that's the most important thing, not you holding on to your data or whatever. And people saw the bigger vision. That was kind of the thing that got it going. And once we implemented it, there were other hospitals that were looking at how we did it and things like that. So now people that are involved in that now have a skill that actually becomes marketable to other places because, I've already been through this, right? I've been through the transition. I know what it's like. So people started jumping on for, their own reasons sometimes as well.
That's a huge impact.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah.
And you feel like you succeeded in that?
Yeah, we did. We put it in. It was very difficult. We had a lot of failure. We had a lot of times where we tried to do it. You're kind of doing it like application by application, if you will. And we had a lot of applications that failed, and a lot of different things that happened. I was out on a boat one time. I get a call from a doctor. Right, I'm getting ready to go into surgery. Yeah, is this thing gonna work? Those types of things.
Yeah.
So very stressful. I'm so glad I'm out of that. Right.
Yeah, but those are the stakes. I mean, that's why it matters. But it's you're introducing something new, so of course there's going to be road bumps.
Yes,
but it's very high stakes because it's in the care of, for like you said, patients.
Yes. I mean, anytime you introduce change, you have very few, because the people that might do well in the new system will be lukewarm, and the people that might not do well are your enemies. I didn't write that. That was stolen. I think it was Machiavelli.
Yeah. Well, and there's user error, which is a part of it too.
Yeah.
And you have to learn the difference, right, between what is an actual technical error and what did this person do that caused, and try to navigate that.
One of the keys to engineering in any field is problem solving.
Yeah.
And in computers, back in the day when I first started, a lot of times it was you didn't have a clue, right? You'd get an error code that what we call the sky is blue error code, which doesn't tell you anything. I already knew the sky was blue, right? And you're trying to figure out what this error is. And so, again, this is where the creative mind comes in, right? When you're tracking down things. And so I actually had a methodology that was taught to me by Jim McMurray, one of my mentors. And he said, well, let's eliminate what it isn't, right? So, okay, can they get to the data? Yeah, they can. Okay, it's not network, right? Can you ping the server? Can you get to the server? Yeah, I can get to the server. All right. So why can't they get to the data, or why isn't this working, or something like that? Oh, okay, data's corrupt, or maybe the hardware's corrupt. So I would eliminate the things that it isn't to get to the things that it might be, and then I would go research the things that it might be.
Huh. Finding out what it isn't will get you closer to what it is.
Yeah, because if you start the other way around, it could be anything, right? So if I just go, I want to find out what it is, well, I have 15 different options. Why don't I eliminate, 7, 8, 9, 10 of those? And then I know it's got to be one of these 5.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That type of thing.
And during this timeline of the project, what happened next? How did you know you were done? Or when were you ready to move on to the next chapter?
Never. So, you were constantly updating. So this was version 1, right, of it. And I'll tell you what happened. So we tested it, right? Everything worked. But this hospital had over 100,000 employees and multiple patients, obviously, and things around. So when we put it in a big scale, it crashed. Because we had tested it in a smaller scale, but the volume of information being fed into it crashed it, right? So like, oh my goodness. Okay, so, we had to readjust, give it more compute, give it more data, all these different things that we had to do. And then so we're constantly, kind of looking through it and seeing where we could improve it. So we were kind of never done. We did get it implemented. And how I knew actually was I went for a physical, right? And the nurse that was in there, either nurse or the doctor, had a little screen, like an iPad almost type screen. And I could see the heading was the title of the project I worked on, right? Oh, they're using it, right? That's how I kind of knew it, we did it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it worked.
And it worked. And so when they came back, I said, hey, how's this system working? Well, it's a little clunky, but it works, right? And I'm like, good. how would you do it better, right, or whatever. And so, I'm talking to a nurse, and she's telling me, right, here's how it could be better. And so I took those notes back, and we tried to kind of reprogram it a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. That's funny to be a patient in your own software. Like it's come full circle now.
It came full circle. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
And what was next for you? Because you said you're happy you're not in that anymore. That's high pressure, right? High stakes, high pressure.
I was having, there were times I don't know if I should say this because people might want to go in the profession, but I was having like chest pains, dude. It was so stressful. So what happened was, so I was doing great, and I'm doing all this work. I had a good career, I had good salary, buying stuff, doing stuff. And my wife, who worked she was like a senior executive at a bank. And so she did like commercial lending and all these different things. And she would come home at the end of the year, and she would get these like 5-figure bonuses. And I'm lucky if I got a, like 8 or 10% raise. And she's not working any harder than me. And I'm going like, well, what is that? So I started looking at going over to, like a software company. So as an engineer, I was on the sales team basically, right? And so I knew there were those types of jobs because I dealt with them at my job, which also gave me an advantage, right? So I dealt with software companies coming in and wanting to sell you solutions and things like that. And the engineer, comes in and talks, and I'm like, okay, So I got a call again. I was always getting calls for jobs. And so one thing I advised young engineers, because I mentored young engineers, take the call. You can always say no, right?
Yeah.
I know people that say, oh, I don't want a call from people who are, well, you never know. That one job that you might want, right, could be in one of those calls. You can always say, no, I'm not interested, right? But that one job might be there. Well, I got that call kind of from a software company, cybersecurity company, that said, we want you. And oh, by the way, we want you to go back as part of the sales team as an architect back in the Kaiser. I'm like, oh, wow, really? Kaiser doesn't take too kindly of poaching people. And then, but it really honestly was around the bonuses that my wife was getting. I wanted to do that, and I did. That's what happened. When I moved over there,
Yeah.
I started getting 5 even bigger bonuses, depending on what I did.
I appreciate your honesty about the bonuses, because in that case, you have a young family at that point, right?
Yeah, I did.
You start to think a little bit differently, right?
Yes.
And so that's the other side, that the financial side is very important.
Yes.
It's not nothing. And
you have to consider that, like you say, you have a family, and that changes you as well. It grounds you, and you again have to think outside of yourself.
Yeah.
And so I really wanted to kind of do, but I wanted to do it in the way that I like to do things. So it was great that I could come back in the Kaiser, right, and help them because I knew what they needed.
Yeah. You knew that terrain.
Yes.
And so what was the learning curve for you in that?
Ooh, it was tough.
Yeah.
So I didn't know. I knew very little about the software itself, which is, as an engineer, you should be really versed in that. But what I could do was get in front of people and talk, right, and present and listen. That was one of the main things, is kind of listening to folks and translating that into something that can help them, right? And both being in front of people as a musician, and also from being at Kaiser and going around and evangelizing, both those things helped me as far as being in front of people. So that part I was pretty good at. What I had to learn were the solutions, the software. I had to go, I had to install, I had to break it down, I had to, adjust things and all these things and I didn't really know how to do it. So they had a lab, right, in one of the offices, and I would go in with another guy, and we would just sit there and play with all the software solutions and install it and pull it out, see what it could do, see what it couldn't do, so that I could then stand in front of someone and talk about it in that sense and how it could help them. So the learning curve was really, I spent, but again, just like when I started, I was reading all the manuals, how to do all these different things. Very, very difficult, very stressful. Oftentimes I got calls about things breaking, and I had no idea how to fix it. And I went through my methodology, right, and it worked. It was successful. But learning, I like to learn.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how did your professional habits change or not change compared to when you were starting out? Because you were talking about you still read all the manuals, you still did that kind of thing. You were still hungry for knowledge and for learning. So what about over the course of your career do you feel like was professional habits that you developed and changed, and then ones that just stayed the same?
You watch your parents work, or you hear different things, and you think that I need to work 14 hours a day, right, or whatever it is. That was a habit I had to change, right? So had to learn to be more efficient in how I learned and how I worked and things like that. I used to work, when I first started in IT, I was on a shift where I was working 12 hours a day, right? And it was you work like 3 or 4 days and you're off and things like that. But and then as I went through my career, I was always the last person to leave and first person there. You kind of thought you had to do that, and you do sometimes. I think you have to get your chops, right? You have to put in those things. But honestly, it's not sustainable. You cannot work 12, 13 hours a day for 30 years. At least I don't believe. It affects your family. It affects different things. So one of the things that I had to kind of get used to was being more efficient with the hours that I had, right? So that I still had hours for my kids and my wife and things like that. And that balance was very important. That was one of the most important things I made.
I love that. And as you know, with the 2.5-year-old baby girl, I'm in the midst of learning that now. But I like to hear you say learning and working more efficiently. So what did that look like? How did you practice that?
Organization. So I started having, so for example, I get, when I was a manager, man, I would get like 50 emails a day, right? Or whatever. And so I started organizing. I come in the office, and I did the same thing when I was in a software company. I would spend half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour, whatever I decided, right? And I would look at my emails. And if it wasn't an email that I needed to respond to at all, got rid of it, so I would never look at it again. If it was something I couldn't respond to at the moment, right, I cataloged it. And everything else I responded to right away. And then I was done, right? I didn't try and do emails all day long and get interrupted for work. So that was one kind of thing I did. The organization of those types of things was really key. I started putting on my calendar when I would do training, right? So when I was working for a software company, I was an engineer, I had to learn all this stuff, right? I would put on my calendar a time and day, so I might spend, an hour a day, 2 hours a day, right, training, upgrading my skills. I had to kind of organize those things
and protect those times too, probably,
and
right?
protect those times so that when people call, I need you in a meeting, you do that. No, I have this on my calendar, and now you can. You can block it off on your calendar so people can't even schedule time there. So I had to start doing those types of things.
That's interesting because there's a parallel with writing. So I'm writing on an animated show now, and there's meetings that you have to do, but you never really schedule your writing time, even though that's the most important part of your job.
Yeah.
Everything that gets scheduled are meetings and things that take you away, but you do have to have blocks of time where you just focus on this one thing, because you can't do it in 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there.
Yes.
You have to just sit and think with it. And it sounds like there was some of that with what you did, and you had to learn to protect that.
Yes. Otherwise, what happens is you're taking that home with you.
Yeah.
And you're doing it at home now because you never got it done during the day.
Right.
And so
Right.
there you go. There's your 12 hours back in.
Yes. And now you mentioned that now you're retired and that you do training, but when you look back on your career, are there things about it that you miss? Are there moments that you stand out to you?
I miss the people, right? People are our, kind of connection to the world, to the earth, or, whatever it is. You ever want to make somebody go crazy, put them in a room with no people.
And do you think that has helped sustain your career for as long as it did, is not losing sight of that crucial part of it?
I think that's one of the keys to success in general, is how you interact with people. My father told me that when I was very young, actually. He said, one of the successes to life is how you interact with people. And I think that's probably more than, the knowledge that I gained and the work hours that I put in and things like that. Probably the most key to my success was how I connected with people. Tell you a story. My first job, I got hired in IT. I interviewed. I didn't have a whole bunch of knowledge or whatever. In fact, there was another guy that interviewed that just come out of a tech school and knew a bunch of stuff. But I sat with the guy. I had just stopped playing football. He was a football player and stopped playing. We talked football through the whole interview. He hired me over the tech guy, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's very important to success both in your career and outside of your career.
This is something I ask every guest. It's called the rule I break. So every industry has rules. Some are there for a reason, and some are just begging to be broken. So what's a rule in your field that you don't follow or believe in?
I am a rule breaker. That's for sure. I'll tell you the rule that I broke all the time, not just some of the time, but all the time. When so again, on the sales side, if you will, when I was an engineer for a software company, and we would maybe have people from the company out playing golf, or we go here, or we go to dinner, or things like that. I never talked business. I wouldn't allow them to talk business during those times. That's what you're supposed to do. That's why the company, boy, I could get in trouble with this. That's why the company is paying for the dinner or for the golf event, right? But I wanted them to relax and have a good time. Let's talk about your kids. Let's talk about, how, doing well in school, how did you grow up? What made you getting into this field? I tried to learn more about the people during those times.
Yeah.
And not stress them out for like, so I need to, build this software solution for this application that's going to go out to this customer. I didn't want to do that. So
Yeah.
I broke that rule all the time.
But that speaks to playing the longer game where you're strengthening bonds between people, which would then make for better employee relations in that right context.
Absolutely.
But in this short-term context here, you're not talking business, but it's still for the betterment of the company. But it goes back to that personal connection again that keeps coming up with you.
So if I had to explain it to my boss, that's what I would say.
Yeah. Advice for young engineers starting out now in this AI landscape. Where do you see it going, and what can people do to separate themselves or to be competitive?
Sure. So I'll talk about one thing that's kind of just more like technical, if you will, and that is the data science area, which is a new area, right? It is basically, it's not really managing the data anymore to see if it's accessible and things like that. It is actually taking a scientific approach to the different data, like in databases, and how you build the databases and things like that, and how you build these models, if you will, for AI. It's a new field actually called data science, and they have like data scientists and things like that. They didn't have that even maybe 5, 7 years ago. There was no such thing, right? So I would say that that's a very interesting field. I talked to a young guy who was making a ton. I was in Chicago at a cigar lounge,
Oh yeah, nice.
and I meet this guy, and he's young, but he's a data scientist. He's not really a engineer, if you will. He's more of a I don't know how to say it. He's more of like a mathematician type
Huh? Like an
thing,
analyst or
like an
something?
analyst, yeah. And he was a data scientist, if you will, kind of putting together like different databases and analyzing all these different things. Like amount of money he was making, I was like, wow, really? So that's one area I think I would say. But in general, my general philosophy, or the philosophy I would pass on, is always that 5 year rule. Really kind of look and see what's going to happen in 5 years. If you can look and see, kind of, and I can tell you what I looked at, and I've done this actually in investing, and it's how I've made money in investing. What's going to be the thing in 5 years? And so I started investing in those things like 5 years ago,
Huh.
right? Robotics, I think, is kind of that next thing. It's almost here, but it's not quite here.
Mm.
But robotics, and again, it's going to replace a lot of jobs. That whole thing, right?
Yeah.
But it is. But whatever that is, right? If you don't think it's robotics, it could be something else. But 5 years, you want to get into the area that is going to be um, the thing, the valuable thing 5 years from now, not necessarily what's going on today. And that's my advice: is to look forward, right? Not backward, or not even, you want to look at the current. You got to live in the current, but what's going to happen what's going to be the thing 5 years from now? Where are we going with technology, right? Or engineering, or things like that? How are we going to fly airplanes 5 years from now? Is there going to be a pilot?
So, okay, the 5 year rule,
Hmm.
looking ahead, and the way that you throughout your career you've thought that way is just obviously being in the environment, and you're learning on the job, but also just reading, taking things in.
Reading is very key. So yeah, I would read what the you know and there's tech rags and things like that that
Yeah.
I read, right? But everybody has them in their field, right? And you read those things, and occasionally you run across somebody who has a vision, and you'll see where things are going, and you'll start to
Mm.
see. So yeah.
Yeah, because someone was talking about the real estate market, and like that next big thing is data centers. So it's people that not just own apartments or they, flip houses, it's owning data centers. And it's like,
Wow.
ooh, because that, given
Wow.
where AI is going, he's like, invest in centers. And that just was like, oh, I am kind of hearing
Yeah,
some of that
because
from a couple different places. And it's like,
yeah,
interesting.
because that relates to the data. So you have to store, tons of data in order to create a realistic model, if you will, for AI. And so you got to have some place to store all that compute and storage. Now, I think another thing might be um, a change in how data is stored. You start talking about quantum and things like that, which is a new field. Is there a way to store data more efficiently than today, so it takes a smaller footprint but still has the same type of thing? So I don't know if that's possible or
Right.
whatever, but yes, the data center absolutely do. There's so much data, and they have to store it somewhere, and they're building these huge data centers now, right? To
Yeah.
to kind of do all the computing, because companies don't want that on their site. They can't pay for all that. Again, hospital, a bank is in the business of finance, not IT. They don't want a huge computer data processing system, right, that they have to be responsible for, hire people for, and things like that. Those are going to be consolidated into data centers. So
yeah,
very interesting.
Before we go, I like to do a rapid fire round. So 5 questions. Say as much or as little as you want. What was the last book you read?
Psych.
What was that?
A book on how the brain works. It was like a psychology book, basically. But the first part of it is how the brain actually works and how we think. And the second part was, trying to determine how we're human, how our brain makes us kind of different, and what's inherent and what isn't, things like that. Real interesting thing. It talked about that we might have the ability inherently to count. So they said if you they took a 6-month-old, 8-month-old baby, showed them 2 things, right? Took the 2 things, can hit it behind a TV, but they took one away. When the baby crawls and gets the one thing, they start looking for the other thing. Are they doing math? How did they know there was one? There was another one. They know one. I have one. There was 2. Things like that fascinate me. Anyway,
that is fascinating.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. So
Psych.
Very, very, very good book.
What's a movie you love rewatching?
There's probably 3 that I could watch, right? Anytime. Shawshank Redemption.
Oh, yeah.
Malcolm X. And you have a picture of Jack Nicholson, and it's his movie.
Which movie? Which Jack movie?
A Few Good Men.
A Few Good Men.
A Few Good Men.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and shout out to our friend Brian Dellett, who's in Shawshank.
That's right, who's in Shawshank, right? Yeah.
I think I might know this answer, but if it wasn't this, what's another career field you could see yourself in?
Yeah, it would be music.
Music. Worst piece of advice you've ever received?
I can't think of, because I probably said no. And, I can think of one where someone told me not to take that job, it would be too hard or something like that. And it was probably the best job I had.
They said don't take it because it would be too hard for you?
Mm-hmm.
And you didn't listen?
Yeah, it was the management job that I had at the hospital.
And why did they think it was going to be too hard?
Because it was very hard.
But and you knew that going in. You didn't underestimate it. You knew it would be difficult?
I did.
And why did you still?
It was more difficult than I thought. When I was telling someone about it, it's like, man, you don't want to do that. You don't want to manage people, right? And that turned out really to be that. What I learned there really helped me for the second part of my life's career, really.
Is dealing with people.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, best piece of advice you've ever received?
I'll go back to my parents who said, you could do anything you put your mind to. And I was dumb enough to believe it.
Chester, we've known each other for years, and you're someone that I've always admired. I view you as a success. And to me, it's because you seem to have, at least the time that I've known you, live a very balanced life. And I aspire to that because it seems like you have a successful career, wonderful family, time for hobbies. And it's like, and you're always in you'll have great energy. And that goes back to just way back when, just being around people and valuing people. And that comes across. So it was a real privilege to get to do this deep dive with you. And so thank you for coming on and sharing your story.
Kudos to you for I didn't think I was going to have much to say, really. But actually I talked a lot more than I thought I would. But you asked some very, very good questions, I think, that bring out, things that people want to talk about.
Yeah. So, well, thank you, Chester.
Cool. Thank you, man. All right.
Hey, before you go, thank you for listening. If something in this episode moved you or even made you pause for a second, please consider following the show, leaving a review, and signing up for the weekly newsletter at storyseriespodcast.com. That's where I share my personal takeaways from each episode, what stuck with me and why, one story at a time. See you in the next one.